This is Ed Rogers, and I'm here to show you how it's all connected. In my most recent programs, I addressed the UN pressure to impose a two-state solution on Israel. I also addressed the myth of Israeli occupation. I hope these programs show how unjust the world body is in its dealings with Israel. Today's program deals with how economically unrealistic the two-state solution is. Several articles have been written in recent years outlining some of the downsides of Palestinian statehood. They all agree that the economics don't work. There is simply no way that Palestine, whatever form it may take, will ever be self-sufficient. Simply put, it is too dependent. And that dependence could come back to bite those who are pushing the hardest for statehood, especially certain European Union members. For example, several years ago, France, having bought into the Israeli occupation myth and confident that an independent Palestinian state was imminent, invested considerable time and manpower training Palestinian police and creating new businesses. They did all this before the anticipated new borders had even been determined. Let's look at a few facts to see how its return on investment may work out. Almost two-thirds of Palestinian government income, about $1.5 billion per year, comes from a tax collected by Israel and remitted to the Palestinians. This happens only because of the goodwill of the Israelis. Should something happen to disrupt the goodwill, the flow of funds would suddenly cease. This is exactly what happened when Hamas took control of Gaza in 2006. If Hamas plays any part in the new Palestinian government, it is wishful thinking to imagine the gravy train will continue. In recent years, 87% of Palestinian exports have gone to Israel. Once again, this source of revenue is totally dependent on good relations with Israel. Israel is the primary employer for West Bank Palestinians. The Israeli settlements there employ tens of thousands of Palestinian workers. If statehood is declared, all these workers will be barred from the settlements because the Palestinian government considers the work illegal. Over the same time period, these settlement jobs have constituted 1/7 of the total Palestinian workforce and constitute 1/4 of the total Palestinian payroll. Why is this? Because Israeli employers pay 2 to 3 times that paid by their Palestinian counterparts. Many Palestinians commute to Israel for the higher paying jobs. 40,000 from the West Bank alone, legal and illegal. These would be in jeopardy should Palestine declare independence. To make matters worse, 1/3 of the Palestinian government's budget comes from foreign aid, mostly from the US, the EU, and Western organizations. The US Congress has already signaled that it might suspend aid if Palestine declares sovereignty. The anti-Semitism of the EU has blinded the organization to the realities on the ground. It may very well end up with a new dependent, Palestine. This is the view of many who have studied the issue. This is the last thing the struggling EU needs right now. But if it is so determined to see Palestinian statehood, it must live by the consequences. Perhaps the most serious consequence of an independent Palestinian state comes from the one who created both the people and the land of Israel. God has made it clear how he feels about those who engage in dividing up his land. There will be consequences, and they will be dire. Listen to what he says in his word. I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Then I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my inheritance, Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and they have divided up my land. It seems like God is currently using the economies of the world as tools for his judgment. Those nations that vote for Palestinian statehood have no idea what they will have unleashed. Don't think for a moment that all the consequences will be delayed until a future day of judgment. The EU is already struggling for its life, and France has been rocked by Islamic terror attacks. Beyond the economic and biblical challenges to a recognized Palestinian state, there lies the question, which one? I'll deal with this in a future program. For now, even if you're not into all the economic analysis, I hope you see why establishing an independent state of Palestine will not end well. And lastly, to lighten things up a bit, here's my thought for today. What do you call a boomerang that won't come back? A stick. I'm just saying. And now you know. I invite you to check out my website at edrogers.net, where you'll see my books, blogs, and newsletters. Until our next program, this is Ed Rogers, showing you how. It's all connected.